Welcome back. On Urban Debate at 9 tonight, our focus is a future threat our parents, our last generation used to talk about. They used to say, if humans do not change our ways, tomorrow is going to bring a catastrophe. Well, that scary tomorrow they used to flag wouldn't arrive tomorrow. It arrived way before yesterday. Global warming. It is an emergency we all know and talk about. But it's that unseen enemy we in our daily lives keep strengthening and seldom get around to do anything to contribute in its mitigation. It's been happening, and now it's happening with alarming regularity. It needs attention. If we ignore it today, our rivers will run dry. Yes, we have known that glaciers feeding our revered rivers like Ganga and Brahmaputra are melting at a rate faster than ever before. The government recently told Parliament in a written reply that the glacial decline is speeding. Remember last year on 7th of February, a portion of Nanda Devi Glacier breaking away in Uttarakhand's Chamoli district triggered a deluge which claimed lives, damaged homes and settlements, and at least two hydropower stations. It wasn't an isolated incident, viewers. It was a result of climate change. Now, scientists say that if drastic measures are not taken to slow climate change, then incidents like these will be more common. Something that happened in Uttarakhand will happen more regularly. The water needed by half of humanity comes from our glaciers, which are called as water towers. The Tibetan Plateau alone is the source of 10 of Asia's biggest rivers and provides water to 1.35 billion people, or at least 20% of the world's population. So tonight, on Urban Debate, we will try to find solutions. No, maybe not the big ones, not look at the government to step in to tackle this issue. We will also explore the power of one. What one person can begin doing so that we can stop the impact of climate change, global warming, which is a big cause of concern today for all of us. Joining us on the broadcast today are my special guests. We have Region Bhakt Kayast, HOD, Department of Environmental Science and Engineering, Kathmandu University. Anil V. Kulkarni, visiting scientist at Divecha Center for Climate Change, Indian Institute of Science. Suruchi Bhadwal, who is Director, Earth Science and Climate Change, joining us. Dr. Anjal Prakash, Director and Associate Professor, BIPP and Indian School of Business, also joining us this evening. Jayadhar Gupta, Climate Change Expert, also live with us on Mirror Now today. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us here on Urban Debate tonight. Region Bhakt Kayast, I want to begin the discussion with you. Firstly, can you explain to us how serious this issue really is today, and why, in your opinion, if we do not take drastic steps today, then we are in for some serious trouble?
First of all, thank you for questions. Yes, in Nepal also we are facing a drastic melting of our glaciers in the Himalayas. The main cause of this melting, faster melting of Himalayan glacier in Nepal especially, is due to the increase in temperature. Because we have seen that from the temperature analysis of 1977 to 2010, we found that 1971 to 2014, we found that our maximum temperature is increasing at the rate of 0.056 degree per year. And similarly, the minimum temperature is also increasing. So due to the increase in temperature or the global climate change or the global warming, the glaciers are melting faster. And we are also having less snow and more rain in the higher Himalayas. So due to that, the new ice is not forming on those glaciers. All snow are melting in the same year or to the next year, but new snow are not forming. Old ice is also melting. So due to that, our glaciers are shrinking year by year, and we have also many glacier lakes in the Himalayas. So those glacier lakes are enlarging. So they are getting bigger and bigger. glaciers are shrinking, but the glacial lakes are increasing its size. So those are the main issues in the Himalayas at present, I think.
Okay, stay with us. Suruchi Bhadbal, what is your assessment of how the situation is right now? Less snow, there's more rain in the higher reaches of Himalayas. The glaciers are melting, at a very fast speed. How important is it for us as the people of this country, as citizens, to start taking some drastic measures in our day-to-day life?
So just to contextualize on the issue, I have been part of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I've contributed as an author since 2002. And that particular report, which is prepared at a global scale, also looking at regional and local issues, had hinted long back, easily like 10, 15 years back, the impacts on glaciers. One is because of the rising temperatures that we're talking about, which is having an impact on the rate at which the glaciers are melting. As if you're boiling ice, just imagine that the snow is heating up slowly and therefore it's melting. So with the rising temperatures, are the glaciers melting, and therefore are the glacial lakes getting formed, as was indicated by the previous speaker, which also pose a threat to downstream areas, because once these lakes burst out, the quantum of water which basically gets released together takes the form of a flash flood and damages all areas in that basically it traverses. So the damage is huge in terms of flash floods and of course damage to life and property that we see. There are about 14,000 plus glaciers in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, so covering countries of Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, Tibet. So the stage at which the different glaciers are in terms of their melting, they vary. The ones which are more sensitive basically are melting at a higher rate. The ones who are a little stable may take some time to basically melt and destabilize. But all the glaciers are getting affected in the region, and therefore pose a threat to both human life and property infrastructure all along, and India is no different.
Okay, all the glaciers are melting. In India, the situation here is no different. Mr. Anil Kulkarni, is the government taking it seriously? Because we are having this discussion today because this data was given by the government to Parliament recently. And in your opinion, do you think government is now taking this threat seriously? Enough measures are being taken?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Of course, government looks like taking it very seriously. That is why this particular parliamentary question was answered. So Honorable Minister has talked about the rate of retreat of Himalayan glaciers, and probably first time government has given the amount of retreat and the data related to the Himalayan glaciers in the parliament. As far as government's interest is quite enormous, in a sense like what has happened in year 2007 when the IPCC report said that most of the Himalayan glaciers are going to vanish by the 2035 or 2037. After that, there's a lot of investment has taken place by the government in understanding the Himalayan glaciers. So numerous academic institutions as well as government departments started their own program to study the glaciers. However, there is also difficulties in interface between the government department or government with the academic institutions or the research institutions. Essentially because the glaciers is a multidisciplinary subject and it interfaces with all facets of sciences as well as many facets of engineering. It means there is no institution which can really study all aspects of glacier. So we see now in the press note itself, you will see that So many institutions were named in which glacier work is being carried out. Therefore, there is a lot of
Right.
confusion about the um, about the um, glaciers, state of the glacier or status of glacier, how they are going to change in future. However, there are numerous tools and models are already available with us. So some of the difficulties, like which earlier speakers were talking, we can really address those by intervention of the modern technology. Of course, it will be always tall order to talk about retarding the retreat of glacier unless some action is taken globally. There may be very little locally we can do. Predominantly, it is coming because of the global climate change. But to mitigate some of these problems which we are going to face in future, there could be technological interventions for that. Uh, I would like to say this much at time.
Okay, interesting point there, and we'll discuss about the drastic measures as well that can be implemented by each one of us, not just by the government. Dr. Prakash, how serious is the issue in your opinion? Two reasons why, if we do not take it seriously and do not begin with some drastic measures, it might get very, very serious for everyone.
Thanks so much, Hina. See, there are two things very, very important. First is that the facts and figures that has come to our table. First is that there are the Himalayan glaciers retreat is at least 10 times higher than the average rate over past centuries. And we have actually lost about 40% of our glaciers in just a couple of the observation that we have. But last couple of decades has been much faster. So if this rate is going to go, our glaciers are going to be retreating very soon, very fast. Number one, why is it important? See, there are 5 million springs. There are groundwater resources. There are 10 river basins. Out of the 3 or 4 river basins are very, very important for us Indians, like Indus, Ganges, Brahmaputra. These river basins feeds about 1.65 billion people in the entire region. If you take out the river basins. So very, very important for us to save these glaciers. And that is not, these are shared resources. See, there are 32,000 glaciers all across Hindu Kush Himalayan regions divided by between 8 countries, starting from Afghanistan, traveling Pakistan, India, China, all the major economies, Bangladesh, all the way going to Myanmar. But very few, about you can count them in your fingers, are the glacier that we are monitoring. So one, there is not enough science in terms of our monitoring of these glaciers. Second, in terms of our policies, in terms of what can be done about it, there's a very less shared understanding of what could be done. With a shared resource, we need to come together as countries, as people, to save them.
That's important. We all need to come together, and we as the people of this country, people living on this planet, have a responsibility as well towards these natural resources. Otherwise, because if these glaciers continue to melt like this, then there'll be no water left in our rivers. There'll be no water for us to drink as well. And that's what scientists are clearly worried about today. Jaydhar Gupta, climate change is a very heavy word, and we all have been taught in schools, in colleges, that, it is a serious matter. We all need to do something about it. Do you see that consciousness coming among people in general? Because it still does not seem to impact people on a day-to-day basis. It's only when Chamoli kind of an incident happens, then we all start talking about it. It seldom makes to 9 p.m. debates.
Hina, I don't think 99% of the planet even understands what climate change is. I don't think people have even connected the dots on climate change, global warming, and air pollution. The root of everything is the same. My colleague here from Nepal mentioned, about the Earth warming over the last 250 years. Why has it warmed? It has not been mentioned. So we've seen the carbon dioxide levels move from 280 parts per million over the last 250 years to 412 parts per million. Okay, this is the reason. What we call the greenhouse effect. Why is the planet warming? It's because of our reliance on fossil fuels. Why do we have such a serious air pollution problem? Because of our need to combust everything. We are heavily reliant on these plastics and fossil fuels, and we have to eliminate them from our life. I mean, the writing is on the wall. India as a country, we are so heavily reliant on our rivers. We're an agri-based economy. There's doom and disaster written everywhere. Heena, I'm a high altitude trekker, and when I was younger, I used to trek to altitudes of 14,000 feet. And it was snow there, 365 days. I mean, that was the snow line 35 years ago. Now I trek up to 18,000 feet and it's barren land. There's no snow. The writing's on the wall. I think we have a lot of experts here, but I think, we have a responsibility to let people know that climate change, the carbon cycle, global warming, air pollution, they're all connected issues. They're not, issues in isolation. And it's all related to, our reliance on fossil fuels. So we just have to move away from our habit to, combust everything that comes in our way. So, that's the bottom line.
And that's very important as well. In fact, you're also, in a way, telling us what Mr. Region mentioned earlier, that, now there's less snow, more rain in the higher reaches of Himalayas. And that's the reason why it is an emergency and we all need to come together. Before I go back to Mr. Region, I want to quickly go across to Suruchi once again. Suruchi, has the government made every citizen a stakeholder in battling global warming? Do you see that happening? Because, we all, as the people of this country or any other country, we all expect that the governments will do something for us. Governments will help us battle climate change, global warming. But how can we become the stakeholders? Has that started happening in your opinion?
Yeah, so when it comes to the issue that you've picked up, for discussion, which is related to glacial melt and what can we do about it and whether governments are doing enough. So I go back to what some of the previous speakers had highlighted. It's a global issue that we're talking about, and we're talking about mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. So of course, governments can contribute in which way at their own end, but the impact has to be, so we're talking about the scales at which impacts have to be felt are at a global scale, where the carbon dioxide levels, which was mentioned by the previous speaker, if it is contained and reduced to certain levels, possibly the rate at which the warming is happening and the change that we are experiencing is happening will reduce. But then that requires a global effort, and for countries to come forward and take stringent measures. With regard to India and what India has been trying to do, we do have a national action plan on climate change. There is a mission on sustainable Himalayan ecosystems. But unfortunately, one of the previous speakers also highlighted, there's hardly any data information on which people can back up information to see what can be done. And therefore, even talking about monitoring stations on our glaciers and observatories and data collected over a longer period of time, which gives us the indication of how stable a particular glacier is, etc., is very limited. And possibly most of the data in this region is also classified because of sharing of borders, and therefore it limits the extent to which we can basically talk about what measures can be considered. Very broadly speaking, there are state action plans on climate change. There's a national action plan on climate change. We are working with the government of Uttarakhand, for example, for their state action plan. And there are simple measures that we would be suggesting to the state is, monitor your glaciers, see where the lakes are forming, because that's not rocket science. Satellite imagery can tell you where the lakes are getting formed over a period of time, and then drain them out in advance so that they don't take
Dr.
forms of
Anjal
floods.
Prakash, Suruchi got your point. Dr. Anjal Prakash, then the question is that beyond these academic studies that keep on happening on this particular issue and government effort, I want to understand, is there also attempt to raise the power of one?
Yeah, I'll come to that point, Hina, because see, these are global issues, and I'm slightly differing from what Suruchi is saying. These are global issues, and it has the scale which is unmatched. So, government and the policies has to be much more. I mean, they are much more prominent. Individual action definitely is there, but the policies are very, very important. And I like to bring up, example here for India. We do have all the action plans and all that, but we actually do not have a architecture which actually take this forward. I'll give you example of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Now, climate change is actually an add-on ministry to the Ministry of Environment and Forest. This is all with all my good riddance, but people who are managing these things are not climate scientists. They are foresters in basically nature. You have to have a special purpose vehicle which directly reports to Prime Minister's office and have a special Ministry of Climate Change. Entire other countries, a lot of other countries, the progressive countries actually have carved out a Ministry of Climate Change. Why I'm saying this is important? Because this architecture of delivery, service delivery, we have best of the policies. India has one of the unmatched policies if you look at the other countries, but we don't have the architecture that delivers on these policies, on the promises. And I really differ from other two speakers, especially Suruchi and the people saying that we have action plan. Where is the money? How is it been implemented on ground? I have worked in entire Himalayan region that we have been working. I see very, very less impacts happening on the lives of the people. Coming to your point on individual action, yes, they are also required. This has to be matching with the government action, but government has to put in the money where the mouth is, and that's the whole problem, that we don't have an entire plan in which we
lack
can
of funding is a big issue. And Region Bhakt Kais, sir, there is a global contest also that we are seeing between rich and the poor nations. Every time there is a meeting on the issue of climate change, the focus is by the rich countries that poor countries should cut their emissions. But what about the responsibility of the developed world? Not many really talk about it. So what is it that you will like to tell us about your understanding of, how each one of us can make a difference? And I have this question for each one of you. Let's talk about solutions, what we can really do.
So can I go ahead?
Suruchi, 1 second. Region first.
Okay, thank you. So again, I think yes, in Nepal also we are getting very less fund for the research in the Himalayas, the glacial lakes and the weather stations at the high Himalayas. At now in Nepal, we have around 300 weather stations across Nepal, but above 3,000 meters, we have only 12 stations, which is very less. So we have from east to west, we have 19 subglaciarized river basins. We need at least 23 high altitude stations, but we have now only 12 stations, which is also not equally distributed. So we need to monitor the snow, glacial lakes, and weather parameters at high altitude so that we will have a good data. Then we can adopt some adaptation measures, as well as in some cases like snow disasters, we can mitigate, or we can get some pre-information. Early warning system also can be done. So I think the government is also trying to install such station in case of Nepal, but it is very slow. And yes, we have also lots of rules and regulations and policies, but still we are not getting enough fund to install and to activate or to carry out those activities. And now the government is also just started to fund some projects, and we are very lucky that we are getting some funds for doing high altitude research at Kathmandu University, which is very good, but it's still very less and it's too late in order to mitigate or to adapt some mitigation measures as well as adaptations activities, I think.
Suruchi, now funds, like has been mentioned already, but is a problem. It will always be difficult to get. I want to understand from you what each one of us can do. I want to use the bright minds that we have on the panel today to, help our viewers also understand, get some ideas to, maybe able to make some changes in our daily lives so that, eventually we all will benefit. Climate change is going to impact each one of us, and we all need to do something, isn't it?
So I go back to the previous point where Anjal was saying, I did mention about the plans, but I said the plans exist, but implementation definitely is questionable, and the rate of implementation varies. One thing which is very important, first and foremost, is, and I think this is a point that Anjal had highlighted, was the level of, and other speakers also, the level of information that other ministries or departments or your states have about the risk, and basically what they can do about it. So I find that this information is pretty limited, and therefore a large focus has to be on capacity building and making departments aware of the risks that pertain to the areas that they are handling, and how can they mainstream the actions that may help in reducing the risks and promoting adaptation. So that it's a very large area of work that is needed, and therefore a close association with institutions,
Okay.
experts who can help you basically understand this is needed. Now, at an individual level, at your and my level, what we can do, of course, we talking about how can we reduce our carbon footprint, individual carbon footprint. Where is it that we're using the energy or burning the fuels? Transportation, electricity that is being used, power that is being consumed, etc. If we can reduce on that, we can carpool, use public transportation. Maybe in our own way, we may contribute less. Segregation of waste, if that can basically be centralized in a certain way, which India has still not been able to sort out, segregation and basically, using the biodegradable waste for generation of energy and tapping that energy. And right now we're releasing all that energy again into the atmosphere, which is again a greenhouse gas and contributing to the emissions from the country. So we need to identify our emission points, and wherever the government needs to take steps at a larger scale, they need to come in individually. What we can do, which way we should be doing that, and contributing to that as responsible citizens who understand the issue. So I think a whole lot of people at different scales come into
And
the
that
picture.
is why, I have this very interesting and bright panel today to guide our viewers. Anil Kulkarni, 2 or 3 things in your opinion that, people can start doing. Small things, small changes that we can bring in our lives.
Yeah, there are a couple of things people can definitely do, and some of the civil societies which are living into the high mountains have already started to do it. And one of the clear example of that is the ice stupa. What it means is that the temperature is rising, as all speakers have said. It has started to melt the snow in the middle of winter. And when the snow melts in the middle of winter, there's a shortage of water when it is particularly required in a late spring or in early summer. So in order to address that problem, people have brought the idea of ice stupa. So and that was eventually taken over by government, and there are so many ice stupas are being built into the Ladakh region. We also need a scientist to step in and say that which regions are suitable for making ice stupa and which regions are not suitable for making ice stupa. There is huge science which needs to go. So that is one part of adaptation strategies we people have started today. As far as those of us who are not staying into the mountains and stay far away from the mountains, key things we can do is avoid our trips to the mountains, because as you take take your jeeps or your vehicles in high altitude region, it affects the glacier in 2 ways. That means you generate a lot of dust because road conditions are not really very good. So you generate the dust. Just dust then gets into the atmosphere and settles on the glacier, as well as is also you take the black carbon, which also settles on the glacier and reducing its albedo and enhancing in the melting. So that is one thing all of us can do is to try to do rationally visit to the mountains, so that we can a little bit extend the life of glacier. It is not that glacier are retreating because of these interventions.
I'm sure Jedhar and many of our viewers are not going to be very convinced with this solution of yours. But Jedhar, your 2 or 3, DIYs, for the people.
No, so, absolutely valid point. I think the obvious needs to be stated that whether it's global warming or air pollution or climate change, these are not natural phenomena. These are man-made problems. And the speaker before me very rightly is, and I actually like to go in the mountains on my feet. I don't like to go in vehicles or planes just because, you don't get a feel of a mountain if you're in a car or a plane. You need to be on your feet. But I completely agree with them. We all have a carbon footprint, and we have an impact on the mountains or wherever we are in that point in time. I think he also brought up another very valid point. So I met with a scientist from the ISIMOD, which is the Integrated Center for Mountain Development in Nepal. And they mentioned that these black carbon nanoparticles in the air, which we call PM 2.5, were coming and resting on, the levels were so high. I think 4 years ago at Churdhar, which is the highest peak in the Shivalik, I measured an AQI in the month of early October of 199, and I was shocked at 12,500 feet. This is essentially black carbon nanoparticles that are coming and now resting on the snow. And it turns from white to an ash gray, which means it's absorbing heat faster and melting, right? So it's not rocket science, but what we can do down here is just fight for, the right path out of this mess. I mean, I think it's my generation that has gotten used to all these silly inconvenience or conveniences of, singles of plastics. Every plastic comes from petroleum. Okay, people need to start connecting the dots. Whatever I'm doing, what is the impact of this? What is my carbon footprint from everything that I'm doing? And people will start realizing, we have to take to public transportation, we have to walk, we have to bicycle. I live in a community and, I'm the only guy who's been driving an electric vehicle, and I don't understand how people are okay with their children playing in the middle of combustion engine cars. Everybody's okay with it. It doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so it's the simple things. This is not rocket science.
Important.
Yeah, I'm not
But
happy.
Absolutely, that's the reason why I asked you. Simple things that we can add to our lives that can help us mitigate this particular, crisis. Dr. Anjal Prakash, I want to give you the last word. 2 or 3 small things that people can start doing, considering how big the problem is. The climate change is not going to impact us tomorrow. It has already started impacting us already.
Yeah, let me just segregate my answer in 2 parts. One is definitely for people who are living in the mountain areas. I think the first thing is over and above what our speakers have suggested. I think 2 things which is important. One is to save our forest. I think each one plant trees and save as much as forest that we can. That's number one. And second is about saving our water bodies. There are numerous water bodies, springs, which is actually being degraded because of the lack of community control over these things. I think these are 2 very, very important points for people living in the mountain areas. For people who are living in the plains and who are benefited by the mountains water, my suggestion actually is to first recognize that this problem, there's a connection that is there. So connecting the dots and understanding that each of our action actually contributes to climate change is very, very important. Just 2 points. One is save as much as don't use plastic as much as you can. I know personally that when I go, I have a bag where I do shopping and I refuse to take plastic. So that's number one. Second is about segregating waste at home, segregating so that you can actually use half of your waste, or more than 60-70% of actually your waste, you can convert them into compost. These are small individual action that can contribute a long way to save climate.
Well, absolutely. To fight climate change, I think we all agree a top-down effort is on, but what's needed is to also have a citizen-driven up from the bottom solution. 1.3 billion Indians can be actually the climate warriors, and that's the reason why we had this debate as well on Mirror Now this evening. I appreciate and I would like to thank all my guests for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now today. Heading into another very, very short break, there's lots lined up for you on the other side as well. We'll tell you what happened in 3 states where we saw voting today on the other side of this very short break. Stay with us.